there's another one.
All right.
Like, yeah, we'll talk.
With the AI out?
Already
Yes.
written out.
Okay, so wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, everybody who's in attendance. Jeff McLaughlin, Tom Tuzin, Dave Hume, Shell Hart, Mark Vincentonis, staff, myself, Angel Montagna, Carrie Satterwhite, Russ Simmons. We do have an audience member as well. Chairman, do you have anything to say? Other than that, I can go through what I have for you.
Yeah,
Greg Pilot just joined.
Okay, yeah, I think if you go ahead and start, because I know you have so much things. to cover.
Okay. First of all, if everybody, these microphones are not the absolute best. So if everybody can talk one at a time, we're having a really hard time doing minutes and hearing when everybody's talking
Yeah.
at one time and talking over everybody. So if we can do that one at a time, that'd be fantastic.
Is there something else to do with the microphones or this just?
No,
this
it's just
is
the way it is.
Got it.
Yeah. Carrie came up with a good solution. We're gonna see if maybe we can move them instead of having them down the center of the room. If maybe we move them out to like one more tile, like maybe over you guys and over here, kind of spread them instead of in a singular thing.
Yeah, one right above Shell, because he doesn't project his voice. Where you just got called out.
It's very well for you, Joe. That's the.
Yeah, it's very punchy. Joe.
Okay,
Fine. Daniel, go ahead.
so. Okay. A couple of things. I'm gonna put up the budget first. Okay. So here's the budget. This is the budget we ended on at the last meeting, which essentially shows that sorry. So I changed it, but what we ended on was leaving $800,000 in the sidewalk. We just left it in that line until we could determine what you wanted to do with it. So before I tell you the changes I made here and walk you through it, wanted to go over a couple of things. So Jan and I both talked to bond counsel. We talked to your current bond counsel, which is Tim Bromwell. We also talked to previous bond counsel, Bob Gain, who was the initial bond counsel in Celebration. And both of them have basically said they cannot give you a definitive answer about what can be bonded and what can't until you have an engineer go out and do a full report on everything you want to be bonded. And what that report has to do is basically go out, you inspect everything, and it has a lot of stuff, you have to put into this report, and it also will determine the useful life of whatever that particular item is. So for example, sidewalks, right? So, and I don't know if that's Mark, if it's something you would do, or we would get an outside engineer to do, but essentially it would be an engineer along with an arborist for sidewalks, because you would have to determine what sidewalks need to be done, and then an arborist with you there to go, okay, with this tree, the useful life of this sidewalk is 15 years, right? Because of the tree roots and all of that. And a bond is 30 years or 20 years, whatever the bond is. So obviously you wouldn't be able to bond sidewalks based on the useful life term. That's just an example, but I'm telling you, that's how it works. So in order for bond counsel to give you a definitive on what can be bonded and what cannot, you've got to first get somebody out there and do the full engineer inspection and report on the items that you are considering being bonded.
Okay.
That's the way every bond works. It always has worked that way. This is nothing new. Mark, I'm sure you're aware as well. That's the way it is.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, and I'm not trying to stack the deck, I honestly want to understand this. I realize they're gonna have to do an engineering report.
Yes.
But are there, I mean, the general question I think we've been pinging back and forth on is hypothetically what fits into a bondable thing. Are there constraints of things? So what I think I'm hearing you say is these all potentially could be bondable projects, but we have to determine life cycles on them, or what?
You have to determine a lot of things based on an engineering report. There's a lot of things that goes into that. One thing is the useful life, because obviously the useful life of whatever you're bonding cannot be shorter than what the bond term is, because obviously that doesn't make sense, right? So I will tell you definitively, both bond councils, pond slopes, yes, those can be bonded because they're a benefit to everyone. And the life of it would be longer than the bond. Not to say you wouldn't have to repair them again at some point, but potentially that those,
Reasonable expectation.
yeah, those are, yes, those wouldn't have a problem. Sidewalks are gonna be the iffy thing. And it's probably leaning more towards no, because you've got street trees here. So in order for you to be able to, and there's a couple of components that go into that. So, and it also, based on the engineering report, would have to determine what class that project falls in. Is it a capital restoration project? So for sidewalks, it would mean you rip up all of Celebration, right? Because then you go into the next phase by looking at the engineering report, is to determine how do we assess everyone, right? So if you're just doing North Village, Artisan Park isn't going to benefit from North Village, because do they have to walk in North Village? No, right? So essentially for sidewalks, you would have to rip up all of Celebration and then determine, okay, street trees, right? You're probably looking at,
Let me reaffirm that. It's every sidewalk in Celebration has to be ripped up to qualify for the bond.
No,
it would be all the ones that, it would be a full restoration. It would not be any grinding or maintenance. I talked to bond counsel, Jan and I did. That is what they stated, both of them, actually on 2 separate phone calls.
but if you're just doing the sidewalks in everywhere but Island Village, you could have a bond for everywhere but Island Village. if
That
you're
is
doing-
correct. Island
all
Village is
depends on-
new under new bonds. You're absolutely right.
That would be something about Island Village with restoration of ponds too.
Yes.
They wouldn't qualify for the bond.
One question.
Mhm.
What about, the existing fixes that we've done? Like North Village and the
Yeah, all
spots
those, this
around.
different little spots. That would be hard pressed for us to say, except for this section and except for this section and except for this section. The only thing I think you would be able to possibly push into that is Celebration Boulevard. Because if you remember,
Right.
you paid, and they did all of Celebration Boulevard. What was that, 2.5 miles or 3 miles of Celebration Boulevard? So that was all literally ripped up and put new. So, and
Wow.
that's,
We didn't rip all of it up, but we did $300 and something thousand worth of work.
It was about a third of the total panels. or something.
It was a lot. There was
There's
a lot.
sure, yeah.
so what my point is, to Dave's point, is we could possibly like push that and go, look, there's no trees along Celebration Boulevard that are gonna rip up these sidewalks, and we just did X amount, so really we could exclude that from
Okay.
a bond. And Island Village would be the same,
Right.
because they're new, you have another, 15, 20 years, whatever that looks like, of life expectancy out of those.
What would be the minimum amount of the bond?
The minimum you can do is 5 million.
So the fact that we would be,
That doesn't make sense.
the fact that we would be restoring things to a common standard. So if we were to say what is the half inch or quarter inch, whatever the.
1/4 inch, 88.
That we were to say throughout town, we are going to remediate everything that is outside of the standard. You're saying that doesn't even count. I would even have to go in and rip up perfectly good sidewalks.
Yes,
Exactly.
that is correct.
I understand the legal answer, but that defies any sort of common sense test, but.
Yeah, and that's where sometimes it makes sense to do bonds and sometimes it doesn't, because there are parameters of where you can take out a bond. But again, all of that is predicated, we can sit here and talk about it till you're blue in the face, but it's all gonna be predicated on you all pulling the trigger on getting an engineer out to provide a report for everything that you want to bond.
But what I think I hear you saying though is specific to sidewalks. Is there any answer that Mark could give which would make it a bondable item? I thought what I just heard is no.
I mean, I don't know. Here's what the report would have to say, because you have street trees, is an arborist would have to walk right alongside Mark, and Mark says, okay, these all have to be repaired. Arborist, this tree, how long is it gonna be before this tree roots pop-up panels again? Mark's not gonna be able to tell you that, so he's gonna have to have an arborist, which is $1,000 a day, right? Based off pricing that we've gotten currently, and then whatever Mark's cost is, to do a full report of all of Celebration. And then the bond council goes through the report and goes, okay, yeah, we can bond sidewalks. Based on this report, you can bond them pond slopes and whatever else you're choosing. Boardwalks, those are full restorations, unless you're talking about a board here or a board there, something like that. You could be able to bond
And we
them.
haven't seen the report on that
That
yet.
is right.
But I mean, what I thought I heard Kara, you said at the last meeting was we're probably not at a full replacement of any one given boardwalk, but it sounded like there may be significant sections of boardwalk that are just 2 or 3 feet length.
I don't think it was significant. I think there was some boats
Okay.
that had replaced, but I didn't hear the words.
What I caught last week was, or last meeting was that they still hadn't gotten to the underwater piece. It sounded like the underwater part was.
The structure.
Right, they've gone through some of it though.
Yeah, he was very non-committal when I asked him.
Yeah.
And we'll have a draft report tomorrow, and then he will be at the board meeting at the end of the month.
Okay.
So based off of what bond council said, I mean, again, they could come here and tell you really nothing until you get an engineering report, because that's what they're gonna go by to tell you, yep. Or
And is-
you can bond A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Are the contents of what we requested in the boardwalk report sufficient to meet, to do the yes or no, or all the right questions being asked?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
Now, again, I don't know if his actual, like, the report he's gonna provide,
Will be enough.
it may have to
Yeah.
like be tweaked a little bit.
Definitely. That I
You're
would think,
asking.
with that report, I think we can get away with that.
Yeah.
I just, oh, go ahead.
So we have enough information to get an engineering report for a bond for the boardwalks, well, we will by tomorrow. And for the ponds,
Yes.
but not the sidewalks, that will require the arborists to weigh in on certain
Yeah.
ones.
Because, I mean, unless Mark can sit here and tell you he can give you the life expectancy based on the street trees, I would think you would need an arborist.
As far as roof popping up anything.
Yeah. Because
They compare
essentially,
So much too.
exactly, and because bond council's not gonna make that assumption, right? They're not gonna say, yeah, okay, we'll give you the life, they're just not gonna do it. So an engineering report with an arborist going, yep, Mark's told you all these need to be and the sidewalks may last, Mark says 10 years, based off of what the arborist says. Well, your bond is, let's say, 30-year bond or a 20-year bond. Well, you can't bond that because you're gonna have to do more work to the sidewalks before the bond's paid off.
So
You see what I'm
The
saying?
arborist can even know when.
They may not.
they might
No.
not, but so here's a question I have. So, but that still implies that every sidewalk has to get replaced.
Yeah, it has to be deemed a capital restoration
See, I
project.
don't see how, at least the sidewalk piece, that's sellable.
No, I mean,
That
that's
just seems like dead on the water.
Yeah,
that completely, it doesn't make sense to me.
no, it doesn't make,
As to why we would even do an engineering report if we know that,
You're wasting.
if we know
It's all up.
that.
There are communities that say, the hell with anything, we're just gonna. And
Well,
they've done that, so.
And if, the last question I was gonna ask, so they're tying in the tree piece. So it almost sounds like it's a 2-pronged test. Either the sidewalks are already popped and we're seeing deviations above the 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch or whatever. Or if
not in
there's,
words, and because, and
Or
here's
and.
why. Because the useful life expectancy
It's tied to the bond.
cannot be shorter than the bond term.
well, no, what I was gonna say is that the second prong of the sidewalk test sounds like it's, hey, either a sidewalk has already popped. Or I'm gonna get an arborist to walk by and say, I'm looking at this tree and saying, within some reasonable time frame in the future, this sidewalk is going to pop? Is that,
Or
I'm trying to figure out the point of the arborist.
if you replace the panel, we pruned the tree root. How long before that tree root comes back and pushes the panel back up?
That's right.
Different than a light bulb.
Because
saying
that's the
this light
difference.
bulb Was worth 20 years
That's right.
versus the light bulb.
Okay.
And you might be able to say
What,
a light bulb, okay, 15 years of light bulb
Right.
is gonna push that.
Right.
You might be able to do it by species, but you're still gonna have to identify each species on each street next to each sidewalk
And
panel.
the maturity of said species.
that's right.
And the other side is, we are maybe gonna spend 4 million. You do all of it, what does that escalate the cost to?
Right,
20 million?
you're jumping up.
Right.
And the whole thing comes down to an engineer's report that bond council is gonna look at. The term of the bond cannot exceed the useful life determined by an engineer. That's one part of it. The second part is how do we assess people? Because certain people may be assessed differently based on where they live and what they're doing, what
Right.
community.
Can't all do it at once.
Exactly,
And do it.
and you also have a time limit on a bond, which is about 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're doing, let's say the sidewalk project,
You're ripping up so.
I mean, you're ripping up Celebration to be able to get it in that time frame, which isn't, that's not realistic, it's not feasible. Can it be done? Sure.
I will say one of the ways that you can work around that, which we discussed way back early in the process, is the fact that you actually start the work before the bond. But you start the clock and say this, it will be captured by a future bond issuance.
There are some parameters around that, and I don't know enough to be able to speak to that, but.
But I thought you had to have issued the, what was the letter we were
Yeah.
talking about?
Right, there's
Yeah.
Yeah.
a process
That's
to
the
start
starting
the
for
clock.
capturing the
It
cost.
still, but it still doesn't help because
We've
we're
already
tearing
done
up every
costs.
sidewalk.
Well, that too.
Right,
It's
so.
Still gonna be done in 3
But
years.
we did talk to them definitively, pond slopes, yes, that is bondable. Because it does benefit everyone.
Part of the system.
That's
I'd assume sprinklers, I'm not saying we would do this, but if we just said, can all the stuff, it's end of its useful life.
That was the other one.
It's $2 million,
Yeah.
whatever, I'm making this up, Russ, but you could do that, I would assume.
You could, in life expectancy of irrigation system is
Well-
20 years.
Right.
Yeah,
I
I
would
would
assume you could
think
do
as
that.
if it's deemed as a capital restoration
Well,
project,
in that case.
based on the parameters they gave us, I would guess yes.
That was the other big one I was thinking was the irrigation. We kind of talked around it.
Yeah.
Problem with the irrigation system, you don't know it's a problem until it explodes. So,
That's like everything.
well,
Yeah, you'd have to
Can
just make
introduce you
the
to a bunch of
determination.
things.
Yeah, you'd make the determination you wanted to redo that as a capital project and
So my question then for you is the pond restoration project. What is the estimated total cost for that? Does it fit, does it exceed $5 million for a bond?
Well,
What did you come up
$8
with?
million in the-
8 or 9 million.
High end, using the expensive,
Man.
there was some variation in the time, that they had the 15-year
All right, so
option that might be less than the bond and then do ponds benefit? They might benefit everywhere, but a pond in East Village doesn't benefit.
It does because it's the south, they're all connected for your stormwater system. So they do provide a benefit to everyone in the community because it's part of the stormwater system.
the next question is, do we need to do every pond this year?
First of all, I want to put out there, when you have these projects, whether it's pond projects, sidewalk projects, anything. I don't know of any district in 16 years that I've been doing this has done a whole project in a year and was like, whoop, we're doing $5 million worth of ponds this year. It's not realistic, financially. It's just not realistic,
You just
right?
left it to the community.
Exactly.
You drive down that
Disruptive.
corridor, you Like that.
That's right.
That's it now, the guy
It
who's.
wasn't particularly fun.
No, it's definitely not. So, but if you have a plan, that's what keeps you out of trouble, is a plan. And again, I brought up another district that has a ton of pond work to do. They budget 50,000 now. That's all they budget. They used to do 100, now they dropped it to
We're
50.
not saying we would do 50 that,
No.
but
I'm just saying, that's what they have dedicated to pond restoration every year. They use that 50,000 based on what the engineer says. Yep, this section, this section, this section, or whatever, however that looks like. Again, and I understand it's kind of frustrating when people are looking at budgets like this, but your sole source of funding without bonding or getting lines of credit is your community. So it's a tolerance level, right? What does your community tolerate for increases? That's what it all comes down to. And then what you have in reserves and what you're going to use out of your reserves to do X amount of projects, maintenance, things of that. You have $2.8 million for the size of Celebration. That is not a lot of money. It's not. That's just the reality. Does it take time to build it up? Absolutely. And you'll get there as long as you're contributing. So with that said, before y'all get into your conversations, I had a conversation today with the chairman at ECDD. And again, nothing's final until the whole board approves it. She doesn't seem to think that the board's gonna have any issue with approving this. There are stipulations. It's not a negotiation. It's their money, but they are wanting to help, right? Because it benefits the sense of celebration. So, right now, today, there is $9.8 million sitting in the trust account that will go back to ECDD. They want to, just on the surface level today, they want to keep 3 million to do their stuff. They're gonna put generators on lift stations and just some other things that they want to do. So we're talking, again, this is rough because no one has agreed to this final number. We're talking $6.8 million, okay? Over 3.77 years, we could get on October 1st, $1.8 million from ECDD to do sidewalk and ponds. I based that number on the 1.1 million we were gonna put in for sidewalks and 700,000 we were gonna put in for ponds, based off of the red areas, right? These are how I came up with the numbers.
I'm sorry, can you start that sentence of the 3.77 years totally through? Can you start that over again?
So
You would exhaust $6.8 million.
in 3.77 years, doing 1.8 million a year.
Track.
Okay, so, and again, we can talk about other things, but, so what that does is every October 1st, let's just say, I just picked the beginning of every fiscal year, they do a wire transfer for $1.8 million to the celebration district. And you have that fiscal year to exhaust 700,000 for pond work, 1.1 million for sidewalk, or vice versa, whatever that looks like. And if you don't use that money within the fiscal year, it will go back to ECDD. If you do use it, great. Then the next year, October 1 comes, they do another wire transfer. Again, the numbers can change. I just picked 1.8 based off of the two numbers we had in the budget. So if you take those two numbers out of your budget, right? Because they're gonna give you that money, let's just say. Then you already budgeted last year $584,375 for the sidewalk project. Okay, that's already in your budget. It's already baked in. So if we raise that to 600,000 and make that your annual reserve contribution, right? Every year. Now, the 6.8 is gonna go away, right? Let's just say 3.77 years. At that point, you're gonna have to start using your reserves to finish funding whatever work still needs to be done on whatever project. So that's where I came up with these numbers. If you do that, then you're looking at a 15% increase. If you were to do something like that.
Can I ask the
Mhm.
3.77 years of 1.8 million per year? Incredibly grateful, appreciative, all that good stuff. Is there a reason they're not just stroking us a check for the 6 point something million and saying, here you go?
Because they do not want it to be an open checkbook. They want the actual work to be done. It will be in an actual agreement saying you can use these funds for A, B, and C only.
No, and I'm fully on board with that. I'm just trying so they're putting constraints on how much they'll allocate over, and I don't even know if we can spend $6 million a year without completely blowing up the community,
I
so.
don't think they want it to go into our reserves.
That's right. They don't want it
Okay.
to build up your reserves. They don't want it to be built a Taj Mahal. They want it to benefit
They
the
want an
residents.
identified project.
That's
So,
right.
so we have to go into each fiscal year having identified $1.8 billion worth of projects that we're gonna show them.
Less,
Yeah.
Or less.
whatever.
Yeah,
It's- that's
doesn't
just-
matter.
What we can add, I mean, obviously we haven't monetized exactly what the boardwalks would be, but
Yeah.
there's some flexibility that says, hey, in year 3, we want to allocate that in these 4 things.
Yes.
Yeah, well, let's be careful about that. What is?
It
the
has
purpose?
to run along with the bond. The initial bond that this money is from was a utility bond.
Okay.
So that's why they're saying sidewalks,
Oh.
pond slopes, light poles would be another one you could use.
This is not boardwalks.
I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
So, but again,
And now
you
I
can allocate, I just gave you those numbers as an example. But like Shell said, if we're going to them year two and we say, okay, ECDD, this is what our project is this year. We're gonna do whatever that looks like, and it's $2 million. Okay, here you go.
So can you, the boardwalk piece, I was doing okay until I heard that. So can you define for us exactly what it means to be a utility bond? What projects do and don't, and I get it, no new projects, we're not building anything else that's new, but of our existing infrastructure, what would not qualify?
I don't know, and I can ask for boardwalks if that's something that the board's looking at. Like initially, when I started looking into this, just to run along a utility bond, I looked at ponds, sidewalks, light poles, all of those types of things. I don't necessarily know that boardwalks would be a no, but that would be something that I could look at
Well,
with
or
bond
alleys.
council.
Alleyways,
Yeah.
irrigation system, boardwalks.
But let's focus on getting the two things that we really stumbled on last time, which is pond restoration and the sidewalks. The sidewalks are only a $4 million project.
I'm not even saying what I would recommend we're spending it on. I would just ask that we can get maximum flexibility in the agreement, just so we know.
Well, I think she said that what we can use it on, but under that, we know we need to do the sidewalks and we know we need to do the ponds. Now, you may not want to allocate $700,000 for the ponds for each year. You can allocate something else. But I would plan on trying to get the $1.8 million each year, spending as best we can.
Everyone work.
And at the end of, year 2030, we're exhausted out of those funds. We keep taking $600,000 and putting into reserves. And that's something we need to discuss as far as reserves go, because you gave us 1.5 times our annual revenues, which is a ton of money when you look down the road. Because can you show what we did earlier? Because I came in here earlier and we talked about a little bit of this stuff. And, every year that we don't fund reserves, we get farther and farther behind because the revenue growth, it's like, if you figure 2.5% per year, we get a deficit of about 150,000 more per year of money that should go into reserves that we don't get there. And so for the last umpteen years, it doesn't go there. So we figured, I looked at desired reserves. Do we really need to have 1.5 times? Because down the road, you're talking about $10 million in reserves. I'd like to have that used. The reserves are only good if you're using it. I don't want to collect interest. It doesn't do anything. But we do backfill the reserves after we use it. So what I was looking at, let's go to the first part. Okay, year one, 2025, we have $2.81 million in reserves right now. That's a shortfall of $2.8 million from what our revenues are right now, based on just doing one times annual reserves for the things.
How was it only 2.8? Because I thought we're to like a 5 million a year operating budget.
Yeah,
So
well, our
1.5
operating budget,
Right.
our revenues are $5.6 million.
Right, but what I'm saying, if her number was 1.5, the operating budget, that should be, we're about a $5 million short.
Yeah, but I'm
Yeah, we
doing
only did one.
He's doing the only one.
If you want to do the top, the 1.5,
It makes
it in there.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
nobody in reality's got that. So
Right.
it is a reality check.
Okay.
So anyway, this carries over. You had $600,000 to your reserves, and actually, this came up considerably higher. The 2026 revenue numbers were $6.3 million, which totally surprised me. But that generated the fact that we were way short in additional reserves. In fact, we will have it, if we don't put $600,000 in there, we still have to be $57,000 short.
The additional 600,000, I'm sorry, assumption going into 26, is that the new
This
planning and Island
This is
Village?
this is planned on $600,000 going into reserves every year.
No, I'm sorry, I'm saying,
Revenue growth.
the jump from 25 to 26 revenue on line 4, where you go from 5.6.
We did an annual 2.5%.
Well, this was 2.5%
Every year.
here. This was the actual number that we have in our budget right now,
That's right.
which is considerably higher than the 2.5% growth. I don't know. I mean, we're there, but it's in our budget.
It has to be the Island Village, I mean, so I'm assuming.
Yeah.
What else
Biggest
is
revenue jump.
changing?
Okay, so anyway, that's what we get each year, and you'll see the deficit as a result of the growth rate keeps going on and on and up. And these first few years is taking $700,000 going into the ponds, $1 million, $1.1 million going into can you scroll up a little bit into the, that exhausts the $6.8 million right there, the end of 2029. Okay, we still have a little bit of work left to be done on the ponds, I guess, about $600,000. And that's where it basically wipes out the contribution there. In fact, it brings it up to $650,000, what it's gonna cost us. But after that, keep going to the far out. What you'll see is eventually around 2037. And bring it down, bring it down a little bit so I see the years.
Column Q.
Okay, that's what our reserves are gonna be. That's our desired reserves. Based on one times. Okay, and that's based on a 2.8% growth rate.
Assuming no other expenses outside of you're not factoring into any of that.
You can't,
Yeah.
because you don't know what it's gonna
I
be.
understand, but
But I'm just saying this,
it's not gonna be.
this tells me right now that we need to work on reserves.
I mean, that's, I think Shell's point is that's the sunniest picture we're gonna see.
Absolutely.
Actually, it could be better if we don't use a 2.5% growth rate. Change the growth rate to 2%. It changes it considerably. And this is based on also, just to put you in there. Did you enter? You didn't enter.
I understand the growth rate, but you're also, what we're not doing is taking in consideration the inflation rate and the cost of construction.
Well,
escalation.
the 2% is your inflation rate, basically.
Yeah, but that's for revenue.
Well, that's.
You're using this, but where's the assumption of your expenses increasing to that?
Well,
There's no real assumptions baked in for your expenses.
When he's saying revenue, that's our budget.
Your budget, your
Yeah,
expenses.
That's our budget, which is your expenses.
Fair.
but
So-
what I did was also put a $50,000 charge in there for like sidewalk maintenance ad infinitum. And it kind of shows us that we need money.
Yeah, no, there's no question, and that's at a 1.
Yeah, that's at a 1.
And
Well,
and the question is, do we need to have it a 1? Because at that size back down there, $9 million towards the end of it, it's a lot of money to be sitting in the bank.
It's true.
well, backing up quite a bit here to our next step, which is, I heard whatever is available from the CDD would have to be codified in agreement.
Yeah, it will be an interlocal agreement and it will lay out specifically what the funds can be used for, because it has to go along with the bond. So anything that they can kind of push, they will, to get away with, to stay in line with the bond, but those will be the only things you all will be able to determine how much you want to spend and what you want to use it for, but it will only be for those specific items.
So we need to negotiate this agreement, job one. What is the timeline on that? Do we have one?
Well, I don't know.
It's not going to be a negotiation. They're going to have, their attorney's going to draw up the thing based on what bond counsel says.
Just say thank you.
Yep, and that's it. It's
Okay.
literally, that's what it is. It's, here's the agreement. If you agree to it, obviously, I mean, which would be a no-brainer.
Right.
You sign it and we move on. If you don't, well, then ECDD keeps the money.
But, and what I'm getting is do they have an indication of when they want this agreement to come to us?
What we want.
It's not to-
Yeah, so what-
Cause I know what our, we're not the one drafting this agreement.
So, and Jan will be involved in that as well. And their next meeting is Wednesday, June 4th. And that's when it'll be presented to their board to get final approval.
I don't know.
That should be sufficient time for us to get it by the October 1st budget start.
I don't know if this is the wrong question. It probably will.
There's no wrong questions.
Why do we still have an ECDD? Why don't they combine the two?
It's never going away.
Never.
They make money. They make money.
Yeah, never gonna go away.
It seems to
It's
be
been a
duplicity
question.
again. I don't know.
It's been a question that's been asked. They do the utilities for the district and some other things. And yeah, it's been asked, why don't y'all just combine? First of all, it's ran by Disney and they will never,
Yeah, because it was a 194 and 192 is ECDD.
yeah.
Oh, I see. So there's,
They're never gonna.
It's a control thing.
yeah, okay.
It's not a moneymaker for
I was
them,
just
but it's a
curious.
control thing.
Oh, it is a moneymaker.
It-
Well, they can't make, CDDs can't make money.
They don't make money. I mean, they have a large thing.
In reserves, they have like 32 million.
They make money. Yeah, but
Their expenses are very large.
so if you had some water
If one of
breaks or
those
whatever,
things-
there's basically,
One time something
yeah,
exploded.
so it's a different,
Yeah.
different
Lift
scope.
They're
station,
utility, not
yeah,
Right.
I just,
and that's literally all it
Development,
is,
that's what
it's utilities.
Well, my feeling is, you know, the $600,000 is a start as far as, the annual reserve contribution. Right, then it needs to be 700,000 next year and 800 the year after that, you know, in order to build it up. That doesn't have to be a stagnant 600,000, but I don't see. I think we can do this without having to do a bond.
did you put in the 15%? You only used, what was the percentage increase?
It's 15% on.
It was 15%. I didn't do the math.
Hey, well, there's a very robust spreadsheet that came with our last reserve study. That's probably a little bit better at planning this out than, you know, that we could put together, so.
Yeah, the only thing with the reserve study, the light poles skewed that thing so terribly.
Yes.
bad, Because they were thinking the life expectancy for these were like 25 years. And in 30 years, I think we've replaced a handful of those.
Most of them get run over.
Yeah.
Yeah, those have been
Yeah.
knocked down.
So it threw your reserve number up like millions. And it wasn't accurate, but the rest of it, it's a great starting point for a conversation, for sure.
Last year I did this as a justification for why we raised our budget up.
Mhm.
But 1996, the consumer price index was 156.7. Up through March this year, they haven't done the June numbers, it's 319.799, which means if you had, give me the next slide there. If we had just adjusted by the consumer price index, it would be a factor of 2.0408. Okay, and the next slide after that. This is what we collected per bungalow, garden, townhomes, and it wasn't until 2016 that we're putting this number in here. If we apply the CPI, that's what we would have been paying each year. Okay, and that would be, I mean,
And that's without, this isn't CPI and the construction index are two different
I
conversations.
understand,
And that's gone a whole lot faster than this.
but this is just a benchmark. If you want to hit the next one there. So our total assessments would have been, well, if you had an estate home, you're shorted us to the $10,000 over the last 25 years. That's all I was basically
Gave
saying.
did? I could do that.
No, that's.
Oh, Shell.
I've got the van down by the river. You're not-
All right, so let's go down to the last slide. Oh, that's what it is, $14.8 million. And that's out of residential property. That doesn't include
No,
commercial stuff. So let's look at the last thing. That has basically been our growth rate.
Yeah.
In assessments for the last 30 years.
And that's all come in the past 40.
Yeah.
right, exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's why I'm
That's the
comfortable
problem.
saying we need a 15% increase this year.
Minimum.
Well, here's my further question. So with all these variables. Yeah, I'm gonna throw, just for purposes of starting a conversation, if we're gonna say we're gonna get all this stuff done in 5 years. What's the straight line average? If we assume we get all the enterprise money, and let's assume for argument that we can use that money for any of the projects we're talking about. Let's assume boardwalks are in, let's assume we can do it on the sidewalks and we can do it on pond stuff and all that. So if we were to get everything fixed in 5 years, what would the straight line percentage increase be year over year? Without doing a bond?
And work that one out. That's,
Well, and what I'm trying to get to is the ultimate question is, you know, some of the bond pieces off the table simply because it sounds like the bond council saying it can't be on the table. It is what it is.
Greg, it's hard to say because you got the $600,000 built in there already
Mhm.
at the 15%. Well, so next year, without any increase at all, it's $600,000. Okay. If we have to increase because contracts going up and other things going up, that may be 2 or 3 or 4%.
Right.
And you may throw in another 100,000, that may move it up to about 8%.
I guess my point is I have, and I appreciate you doing the math, number one. I have agita to the nth degree about continuing to do double-digit increases year over year.
I agree with you, but
Yeah.
at some point in time, when we feel comfortable with our reserves, then you drop it down to a level. To maybe 4 or 5%.
Right. But
But I also I would also have a problem with having a 9% increase and having a bond.
Mhm.
Because we're pretty much double taxing everybody on that, right? So look,
I'm just trying to figure out the time that we're gonna peanut butter. this whole-
I understand, and we probably can play with that and work that out. You did it beautifully when you started on the board to have the fight to go ahead and increase the fees.
There was nothing beautiful about that, brother, but thank you.
No, listen,
That was a fisticuffs.
it was, but the reality is, Gary Moyer always said,
It's coming.
it's coming. I sat in meetings where he said the day of reckoning is coming, right? And everybody goes, yeah, but
Not on my watch.
not on my watch, right?
I just-
Or
I
I'll
just pulled
move.
the pin out of the grenade.
Correct. And everyone is upset. I'm not saying they got less upset, but the reality is that we're looking at these numbers. We all have a financial responsibility for the wellness of this community. We do the best we can, okay? And we have the last 3 years, been trying to fix everything that had to get fixed in an orderly way. We got some, big stuff that that wasn't touched, that we now have to go ahead and do it. I know we're gonna hear, probably, this isn't a good year or whatever. The reality is all these things have to get fixed. We can't get out of that. We are beyond blessed for the ECDD and for you to go ahead and find this information, to go ahead and have that amount of money to get us through some of the stuff. Otherwise, that ain't looking like a 15% increase. Okay, I mean, that's gonna be the hard truth. So I think there's gonna be, we're gonna walk out of here to try to get something that we're kind of happy about, not thrilled about, and that's usually what happens when you're doing budgets. No one walks out and goes, we did it. Unless for the last 20+ years, they pat each other on the back and said 0 increase again. That was the only time everybody was happy.
Now, there is some tweaking that we may do on the budget still, is that correct?
I mean, you have to keep in mind, when we approve the budget at the meeting in May, we can't go down from there. Whatever number you end with in the May meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, we can go down, we can't go up. So we need to make sure that we're putting in anything that could potentially need to stay in, because if you don't, we can't add it later. All we can do is come down between May 29th
Right.
and July.
But that's how we've done it in the past.
Right, but procedural question, knowing that there's this agreement coming, are we handcuffed if we don't put something like that in the budget for what we want? Because then it's going up if we have
I
additional
think we're gonna
expenses.
get it though.
Yeah, I mean,
Why would we even account for it now? I would just count that as icing on the cake. I wouldn't
Yeah.
even count that in our budget right now.
and that's, you're exactly right.
But this is procedure, is it,
Well,
in other words, are
You would
we,
have to go to reserves. That's.
I mean, the reality is, even if they stroke that the day after we signed our draft budget, we would still be looking at double-digit percentage increases, even based on what Jack just read.
well, basically, you're not gonna include the 700,000 or $1.1 million in your current budget.
Right.
yeah,
Okay, it doesn't go there at all. The only thing you're gonna see is a $600,000 reserve contribution.
and what I'm getting at is that if we do want to do it, but we don't have it in the budget,
No,
okay, is that an issue when you're saying you can't go up?
No. Again, what'll end up happening
Just
is
go through reserves.
you just, any
Our-
projects you want to
Our
use, you gotta
assessments
go to
can't go up, but our
reserves.
expenditures can go up.
Oh, yeah.
Because we
You're just taking it
anticipated
out.
revenue.
Right.
You will just take it out of reserves because you didn't specifically budget for it in your general fund.
Or that 600,000, which we transferred to fund reserves, doesn't go to reserves now, it goes back in your operations.
Operations.
well,
That's right.
let's not even go there, because here's the deal, that $600,000 isn't all covering the reserves. You're only get effectively 450,000 out of that, because the rest of that is caused by the increased requirements by your increased revenue collections. So our gap is
Yeah.
getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We need to You can't touch that.
Dollar amount, it's a percent.
And
It takes
It's truly not a $600,000 increase, because we already have the 585 and change already baked into your budget from last year. So the increase is
16,000,
what?
just 16,000 to bring it up to 600.
Yeah, it's not much of an increase. The other big increases that are driving your 15% is the increase in insurance. And then you have your contracts that are right at, about a 2 to 3% increase. And then the other one, Brett has not gotten me a number from Island Village. We put 300,000 extra in that line item for landscape.
That was a guess.
And then we also bumped up Clark from if you kept them, you're at 265 and I put it at 300.
They're at 248 right now, 246.
Yeah, theirs is a 4% increase because they haven't increased it. But it would be a 4% increase. If you go with Clark, you're talking 265, you can lower that number. I put in there 300 just in case, something comes in different.
I would have put a pitch there not to lower the 300, but to use the excess to go to reserves.
Heck, you can absolutely do that.
Yeah, it just would make sense, because we're gonna do like, oh, let's cut 5,000 here, 5,000, and at the end of the day, we're like, we're not, no, and if we don't spend it.
So
We know we've got requirements out there to spend it. Why?
Right, it's not like we,
Yeah, it's like we don't have a home for it.
no.
So essentially what we've done is your administration, which is your insurance, management, legal, engineering. We went through every line item before. So you're going from 474, 467 to 532, 115. Okay, so there's a little increase there. Then you're going, that one stayed the same. You're going in physical environment, 407, 960 to 484, 800. And that is primarily, you've got your aquatics goes from 131 to 150. Your pest control, like I said, went from 250.
Right.
It should be at 265 if you keep Clark, but I bumped it to 300 because we go out to RP. I don't know what those numbers are going to come in at.
Right.
So those are the two increases there.
How long is that Clark number good for? The new number, the 260 something?
Oh, they've been a really good partner. They're not gonna say anything.
I asked them
about
for a cost for the next fiscal year.
Yeah.
I said about a 4%.
No, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase my question. I know the quote's good for 30, 60, 90 days, whatever, but the 264, is that good for one fiscal year? Is there a 2% escalation after that or?
She didn't provide, she just said that was for fiscal year 26, and we can negotiate that when it's time to renew the contract and ask them, if they can hold it, if they can.
I thought we had put rate escalations for the duration of their contract, and I don't know that we would, we've never done a 4% rate escalation on any of our vendors.
Clark's, we
But
didn't
it's
redo their
expired.
contract because they were still in the midst of their contract from the last RFP, which you stayed with. I'll look at it and see, but I don't think there was
No, let's
anything.
verify
done
that.
there. Yeah. Your flood control, again, that was at 130. We brought it down to 80. So you saved a little bit there, and then
You gotta talk about tweaking the fee from the district. From CF5 and the maintenance.
yeah, so we lowered these numbers from 130 to 80. Your only two in there now are stormwater system, that's 30,000 with the Reedy Creek or Sif Todd drainage fees, which Enterprise pays 20% of that. And then we pay our percentage based on the contract and the calculation. And then your R&M stormwater system, we put 50 in there because Russ has to do some,
And for the
Repairs.
board's application, that was just added today, though.
what
That-
was
that
the 50,000, yes. That was just added today, this one.
We talked about that last time.
Yeah, we didn't have a number of.
Right. And then, your field component, that's inclusive of everything, sidewalk number, all of that. We basically, it changed a little bit, 3392692 to 3936. And we went line by line, in this. So there's your increase there. Road facilities went from 438 to 458. And your increase there was your street lighting, 195 to 210. The rest stayed the same except for the radar sign. We bumped it to 20,000 because Russ wanted to do another sign. And then here's your total expenditures. $5,067,919 to 5.7. And then we have down here where we did that initial 800,000, took that out. You get the money from ECDD to do that. Then we just bumped that 584,375 to 600,000 to contribute to your annual reserves.
Can you scroll back up for a second? to
Sure.
Call them capital projects or whatever's highlighted in yellow on the left. So we're not doing, usually staff proposes a handful of projects of things to do. So
Yeah.
this year, we're not doing any.
Well, all of those things, if you remember, other than aerator install,
Mhm.
all of these are maintenance. The only big one that we did a couple, was it last year, or the year before, was furniture. We bought new teak
benches
furniture,
and stuff.
yeah, for downtown. Shade structure roof, we did that 2 years ago and did the roof. Nash Roof did the, how many?
All three of them.
All three of them. So there was
So-
no need to do that.
I mean, the things that we talked about last meeting, and I don't remember that we got a clear answer.
Mhm.
The alleyways, I know what you pulled up, Tom, was there was a schedule where the next alleyway was, or the next
I have to look at it.
village. I mean,
That's
It's
eligible.
on the website, yeah.
Whatever we want to put in for reimbursement or.
But it's already-
processes.
And you've always had $225,000 earmarked in reserves. Doesn't mean you have to use it. You're not pigeonholed to use your reserve funds for anything, but there's always been 225,000 in there for alleyways.
Right.
So
So-
that is earmarked in that 2.8
I guess my
million.
question is.
So the other thing is that if you look at that chart, I don't have it, it gives you a window.
Mhm.
So it'll come like, oh, it's, 2025 or 2026, but it's like 2026 to 2030. Each of these alleyways so even before you actually have to go ahead and say, oh, we need to do the alleyways. We probably need to inspect the alleyways for that designated area to see, is it, no, it's fine, or not.
Can we do that before the next meeting? Can we? I would like to ask Mark to do that with whatever the next village is in line.
He should come at the beginning of every fiscal year and tell the board, hey, guys,
Yeah.
this is what you did this year.
Because the next one was North Village or Main Village?
It's.
I don't know.
I think it's main village.
Yeah.
Which one?
Main central, yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
Celebration Village is what the initial.
I'd like to know by the meeting if that's a thing, and if it is, you were pretty good on your guess for artists, and I think we were within 10%.
Yeah, it was about 10%.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely that 225 number, I'm 1,000% confident it's gonna go up. Cause I don't know that, I mean, I can't imagine costs have still stayed the same.
Angela, can you go back to the reserve?
The number?
600,000 staying at par, if you go from 5 million to, 6. Number. If you went 594 divided by 5 is 12%, that's not even 12%, that should be more like 15%. At 600 should be 850, 750 at least. I would increase, what does 750 do to the percentage
Assessments?
increase? Yeah, if you.
Let's see, around 17.
I would wholly opt to do that. We gotta get ahead of it a little bit more than that. It's just not. enough.
18.5, which is actually where, by the way, you ended before I kind of moved the numbers around today. You ended, I think it was like 18.2.
Easter thing in some ratio to the increase in expenditure.
Michelle, I think if we take the difference between some of the contracts, she mentioned that she overstated and put them in reserves rather
There's also some unknown unknowns. I'd rather leave that
Yeah.
swag in there. I hear you, but we're still so far behind.
well,
We have been far behind since
I
the
understand,
beginning.
but
we didn't realize
It's not gonna happen
18% was,
it wasn't until I started figuring out the shortfall each year that was
it's a
accumulated,
big deal.
how far behind we're starting to get.
And again, that's without, I'm gonna say it again, without the construction expense escalation,
Mhm.
which is huge compared to COLA.
What
So
is
we're-
construction escalation?
Over the same period of time, it's like
I'd have to
3 times what.
I'd have to look at the CPI for construction stuff.
I mean, I did the analysis myself. It's a lot.
It is, but if you look at it's mostly, for our stuff, it's mostly labor. If you look at, concrete costs, obviously,
Sure.
all that stuff. Which, again, nothing was allocated for any of that stuff. I don't disagree to,
Defensible.
I don't disagree to catch up. I just wanna keep it within that realm of possibility because, I try to balance, number one, those people are not gonna be happy every year. I get that. But I also wanna keep it like within a particular area. What was last year's increase? 16.9?
Change.
Well, I think, I mean, the reality is we've got a dozen moving variables in this equation right now.
Sure.
That, and I hate to say it because I know Dave's gonna throw something at me.
He's gonna throw something at you.
Anyway.
Whether you say something or not. See?
That was a preemptive throw.
There you go.
Here, use this.
I feel like this is more than any other year that we've done this. This is the year that we just have to peg a number and back into the number that we're saying, this is the maximum tolerance that we have. Because at the end of the day, the residents are gonna look and say, what was the percentage increase that I'm seeing? We're never going to, you'd have to put it at a 300% increase or something insane
Mhm.
to get us on track.
Yep.
It's gonna be, what's a number that we're tolerable with? And then we're gonna be backing into that number. And Dave, I hate it. At least in the first 2 years where we did this, we had a much narrower shot group because we were only looking at operational expenses. We weren't really talking with reserves. We weren't talking in capital projects.
I
It
gotta
was just
say-
O&M.
I gotta apologize, because back then, we took 350,000 out of asset stabilization.
Yep.
Mhm.
And used that to lower the budget cost, which we should
Yep.
never have done.
That was your idea.
It was my idea.
Here, hold on a
It was
second.
terrible. But when I'm saying asset stabilization, that means steal from reserves.
Yes,
That's right.
you can call it whatever you want.
So
Pull it from reserves.
Brenda, can
But
you
that's
tell me,
That's the same percentage, by the way, 750 to 6.4, and then 584 to. I mean, it's you're 12%, so I leave it there.
Brenda, can you tell me, and obviously increases started when I took over for Gary, which wasn't a good perception. Can you tell me, our increases from the time I started to today?
Yes, I can. Give me just a minute.
Sure.
Well, they haven't much.
So that's obviously the big stuff. I still want to get into some little of the details. Some of it left over from last meeting, which was, remember how we were confused with all the aerator stuff? So did that get ironed out? Because we needed an aerator repair item and then an R&M item. We needed a fountain repair item and R&M item. And
We did
needed,
that.
okay, and then a splash pad.
Yep, we did all that.
All right, have that breakout.
So here, oops. So here is your fountain and aerator.
Combining the two?
Mm-hmm. And then,
Then you got the contract aeration up there.
that's right, here's your contract. This is just R&M.
Yep. Okay,
And then
that I understand.
here's your contract aeration.
Right.
And then here's your contract fountain. Well, it's gonna be splash pad, sorry, which is 9,000. So yes, we broke it all out according to what we talked about at the last meeting.
Contract.
I'm sorry?
So per contract. Yeah, there's a contract that has a line
And
item.
then.
Yes.
Got it.
That's right.
So we have a contract for splash pad, we have a contract for aerator.
Uh-huh.
Contract for the new fountain.
All right, where's? I don't see contract for fountain.
Contract
Right?
aeration.
Where's the contract for fountain?
A contract duration.
It's the splash pad is fountain.
No, we.
New fountain.
Nope.
No.
The
The
new
new
fountain.
Splash pad is splash pad. Contract aeration is what that is.
Go up. You know, then maybe
Oh.
do we not have a contract that
It's
maintain the
that's
fountain?
R and M fountain and every, no, there is R and M
It's making
fountain
fountain.
aeration,
Yes.
114.
And
No,
that would
no,
be,
contract.
Yeah, to go back to contract.
That's the one that's like.
there is no
$500.
contract
Yeah,
for,
it's $500.
Yeah. for the fountain.
Yeah.
And we combined that into right here, because when did you say your contract was $500 for maintenance? So we put that under R&M here. There is no contract for the fountain that got donated,
Yeah,
and that's the only fountain we have.
right. Okay, so it's different than the splash pad because we have
Yes.
a contract maintenance on that and we have contract on the aerators.
Yes,
So, and we don't
That's-
have a contract for the new fountain.
That is correct.
Okay.
All right, so I'm confused on that one because we talked last
It's
meeting.
$500 maintenance, but it only covers,
Really just preventative.
that's all it is. So we put that in here on R and M fountain and aeration. It's $500. And then the excess is for any parts. If you remember, we talked about that.
Right.
There's gonna be parts that have to be bought that aren't covered in that $500
Yeah,
maintenance.
because I read the scope during the last meeting, doing read the scope.
Yep,
Do we need R&M for the splash pad?
that's what this, I can add splash pad, but that's what we talked about, bumping that to 15,000. We would be able to cover splash pad parts, any fountain.
Yeah, you make it one line item, that's.
It's fine.
I thought the whole point was to match the,
Well, if you want an extra line item, we can make as many line items as you want. I just don't think your budget needs to be 35 pages long.
Well, the methodology we had said was if we have a contract, we're putting a line in.
Yep, so you have a contract for splash pad, you have an R.
Do we anticipate needing to break out that one line item to know what we're spending on fountain versus splash pad versus aerator? Or can we put all R&M?
And your GL will show that.
You can pull it out.
Yeah.
I
Your
would,
GL will
even
show
though it's
that.
an extra line, I would prefer to, just for consistency, so there's.
Because you'll ask the question next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
well, Dave will.
We'll spend more than $500 worth of intellectual capital trying to figure this out again.
I'm sorry, did I say that?
Say it
His camera's.
So you want-
Just pointing out,
So you want
No, I want
R&M
consistency.
That's bad.
R&M splash pad, you want me to add?
You want a separate line item for that, correct?
just for Greg, it's 3 items for R&M then.
R&M
I saw that.
splash pad.
I hadn't seen that until last week.
How much do you want to allocate there? 25,000?
Hey, what?
Come on.
Get that napkin and throw it down again, please.
I gave it to you.
For this. For this. I think I can do them.
I think you can lower, well, I think you can lower, now if I can find it. Oh, this, I think you can lower this one back to 10,000 and put 5,000 in your splash pad.
Do that. There's no bottom line increase. maybe.
Exactly.
Beautiful. I love it.
Okay, now you gotta send this to us.
Well, I mean, yeah, if we're done with it,
Yes, the 750, leave it.
And hold on, you said you added 50,000?
50,000, not there. I added 50,000. Yeah,
Yeah.
oops, is it up here? Sorry.
Yes. Kind of hard time finding it on there.
We added 50,000 here for R&M stormwater system repair and maintenance, because you have what coming
So
up?
we've got Harbor Circle, we have big hole right by the storm grate. They hadn't patched that. That was 5,000. We've got another one in the camera, trying to figure out if that needs lined. And then we got one in Spring Park Loop right now next to 944.
Yeah, you got the big number.
It needs to be lined. That's gonna be $33,000.
What?
So is this the first time?
That was a few grand last time.
So just a few mini grants.
33,000 for
Versus
Spring Park?
In the life of a tree, that's.
Spring Park Loop.
Why, what happened?
HD, what do you call it, PE, plastic
Yeah,
fitting
plastic
pipe,
pipe.
split.
Oh, really?
Really exploded.
We have, we don't have all concrete?
Nope.
South-
Didn't you
South
say
Village,
South
South
Village,
Village,
place
yes.
we're gonna have leaks if we ever leak?
South Village is the
Trouble.
other, well, that is South
Oh,
Village.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's the worst.
There's a plastic pipe in there.
Yeah.
Or parts of it anyway.
If we're gonna have a leak, it's gonna be in South Village.
Yeah,
Plastic pipe does technically last longer than concrete, according to manufacturers and all that kind of stuff, but it comes down to.
That's not what I've seen in real life.
Comes to how it's installed.
So in 2023, the 23 budget, the increase, which was the first year that I took over from Gary, 36.68%.
That's what got passed?
Yes, I don't think it's that.
No.
No.
Is
Brenda,
that in the letter?
It was sub 20, because that was the year
That was the letter with what?
that was the year that it started out at 88%.
right.
it was never
Strike that from the record.
88%.
No, it was, there was somebody
It
had
was
it.
never even.
I'm gonna call that the Floyd
think it was
Floyd
1,000.
Memorial budget.
It was worse. It was.
And then 24 was 12% and 25 was 15%. I'll double check the number for 23.
think it was 18.
Is it a coincidence or is it just since you've been here, Angel, that we've had to raise the prices?
Yeah, because you never raised them for 30 years.
Oh, boy, it's getting.
She's just a little bit more effective than the previous manager getting us to rate them.
How many years were you here before?
Once your new gate.
300.
You want your new
Right.
police?
And so
Now,
this R&M for stormwater, have we ever had to,
yeah, we had one pipeline in Bank Shores, I think, 3 years ago, $68,000.
all right, so these are one-time thing. Here's what I'm getting. at. I don't like to just plop things into the operating budget and then
You
pull it
need-
out the next
You need
year.
a stormwater
You gotta have some
line
kind of a
item in
fund.
there, you do. I think previously you guys had like $1,000, which isn't really, it's not even gonna pay for a grate. A grate itself is like $1,500. So you definitely need something in there. I don't necessarily know if 50,000 is the right number, but we were predicating it on his cost of this particular repair and then having some, but I don't necessarily know that you need 50, but you definitely need something in there and it definitely needs to be 5,000 or more.
Okay. The other thing I noticed is that the vehicle line item's still in there, correct?
I believe you, yes, we left that 50,000 in there, so.
So Tom, did you make any conversation?
Yeah, well, I spoke to Chris and he's
Mhm.
amicable for anything we want to do. Problem is, and this is up the problem with us, right?
Here's a shot.
Problems with us. The contract isn't really laying out, for example, they're charging us on vehicles.
Yes.
Okay,
We're not.
once we open that up. Now we have, now there's costs. And I have,
Well, let me ask you a question.
it's one of the don't poke the bear type of situations where it's working. I asked him, for if we wanted to add 2 mules or whatever. He said, we can work that one out.
So you're saying though, is Infomark willing to codify exactly what we have today with the X number of trucks and Y number of mules that they're doing at the same price and just codify what reality is today in writing? So we're not.
Well, see, that's poking. Isn't,
That is poking because you're opening up the contract.
we don't want to poke.
You're opening up the contract.
And the way to not poke is for us to buy that. Is
So,
that what you're getting?
no, so let me tell you.
Nice try.
Here's the
No,
easy
not at
part.
all.
Here's the easy part.
That's absolutely.
Well, that's-
Angel's talking.
If you, the easy thing is, right now, currently today, if a truck needs to be depreciated and taken out, we're replacing it. We're doing all the maintenance. We have the insurance on it. If somebody gets into an accident, it's on us. It's not on the district.
Great.
So, but if you want us to put it laid out in the contract, what you guys wanted at the last meeting, which is here's what Infomark owns, here's what you own, that's fine. But if you're also gonna go a step further, which is what you discussed, which is when a truck goes out, Infomark has to replace it. Okay, that's gonna cause you an increase.
Angel, I was sold when you say you guys, because I was not part of it.
Neither was I.
No, what,
That's,
no, but that actually,
Actually, it was this side.
Let me own it because there's $50,000 in the budget now for a vehicle.
let it ride till next year. We'll figure it out.
So last
After the contract.
What does that mean? Are we buying a vehicle or not buying a vehicle?
Oh, we're buying two $45,000 vehicles.
So at the last meeting, we were just buying one.
That's
So again, this is something we can probably we can figure out.
Well, but what I thought I heard Angel say, the first part is if we just codify as is today, don't change anything, they'll hold the price where it's at.
Right.
Just for clarification's sake, all we're trying to do is capture, hey, you're gonna do trucks and X number of mules. For that, Infomark will not change the price?
I would just simply say, if you want it in the contract, that Infomark owns all fleet vehicles with the exception of 2 mules.
Right.
Celebration owns 2 mules and leave it at that. I wouldn't ask for them. I wouldn't put anything in there.
Then that's okay?
Place or
Ain't broke,
anything.
don't fix it.
No, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, because that's where you're gonna get into cost, because if you're gonna want us to be definitive to say, when a truck goes down, Infomark, you're gonna replace that truck. there's a cost to that. I mean, right now, you're not seeing any cost to any of
See,
this.
$50,000. So what's
Well,
that?
we own those two mules. I mean, that's,
That's, no,
those are the only
I'm,
two.
okay,
Yeah.
so that's to replace what we already own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, you're adding a new vehicle for Island Village,
Yes.
and you're replacing one of your older.
Right.
Because it's.
So essentially, that's what you'd be,
Yeah.
and you would own, those would be the districts.
More of an accounting question. Is that really need to be in the operating and maintenance? It's just, we're not buying vehicles every year. Shouldn't that?
No, so what'll happen is you can take it out of reserves, if that's what you want, which is, you already have the money there, or you build it into your budget and next year you've got 50 grand to play with and throw into reserves. It's up to you.
And here's what I'm getting at is when I have to justify a blank percentage of increase,
Mhm.
that's gonna be, if I'm looking at that, like, well, what is 50,000 for? Make do with what you got.
Well, there's a like.
There is a new village and there one has.
I get it, but if it's in reserves, then you don't have to have
Yeah,
that
but you're gonna
conversation.
you're gonna have constant stuff in there. We're a growing community and you're gonna time things out. You're gonna have to put that in the budget.
Have you seen,
I don't-
we can have, I could do a guided tour of the mules.
No. I'm
Once
just-
they take a look at it, they can go, I'll
Okay,
pay.
I'm not-
That is-
Once they see that, I'll.
That's, the thing is, I don't get, if you don't have to have that conversation if you just put it in the reserves, it's, take it out of there. I don't get why
You
it's,
can absolutely take it out of your-
Capital versus operations.
Yes.
What you're looking
Yeah.
at. So
it's a capital expense.
It is,
Yeah, but
that is not.
Somebody's checking that out. God bless them. I'd love to talk.
Well, because they're just gonna have a blanket statement. Then you're raising 18% and there's gotta be fat in there somewhere. They'll look for it.
Well, let's say we don't host parties. We don't have
But
parades.
think about it. Let's take the
We don't
50,000
have
out.
social, we don't have anything. All we do is fix things.
We can take the 50,000 off and you can allocate it through
Then-
reserves.
then
It's a
put reserves
capital,
at
it's a
18.
capital expense, so Dave's logic isn't off. It is a capital expense. It's not a maintenance.
Days off.
But they just argue with me just for spite. And it's, it's a natural reaction.
Because we're Carolina fans, Dave.
Yeah.
So do you want to leave the 50 in here? Do you want to take it out of reserve? Do you want to put the 50 in a different line item?
I would put it in reserves and up the reserve contribution to 800.
Oh,
800. Wait a minute.
Let's show.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Steve, you got-
So if he's gonna do that.
Well, I don't mind doing that because I'm going lower, so it's okay. We can't go higher, we can go lower. Right, at the September meeting.
Look at him, not me.
July.
Sorry, no, May, at the end of May.
But you take.
So you go as high as you want, but I ain't going that
You
high.
delete the 50
So-
on the operating
Just
section.
remember where that extra 50 came from.
Kim,
So,
I'm fine with that.
so that puts you at, you're still at an 18.5% increase.
Right.
And, again, we can make adjustments to this number at your May meeting, but I'd be very careful about going a lot lower than that because if something happens,
If we're gonna go a lot lower, just do it now.
yeah, because here's the thing. We're sending out letters to every homeowner if there is even a $1 increase. I wouldn't want to freak everybody out and cause people some mass panic. If you have no intentions of increasing this budget 18.5%, then I would say get your number down to realistically where you want it to be. Because to send everybody a notice and then in July come and go, we're just kidding, we're only gonna do a 2% increase. You're sending people into panic for no reason whatsoever.
Every year.
Increase last year.
16.
15%.
I can tell you, we had people in here crying.
Well, I understand that. The problem is that, you know, we were crying last week. Or last time we were meeting, right? Because it's a lot, right? I know that.
And that was.
I don't think we're being insensitive.
55%. So.
And that is in the
Dave is
adopted
88.
budgets, 36.68%, 12% and 15%.
The 36 was the initial number the first
No,
year.
that's the adopted.
Ooh, I don't think.
That was the adopted.
Yeah.
That being that.
It was very high. And that's
It was high the first year, yeah. And then we did 12% in 24, and we did 15% last year for 25, and then 26, obviously, here you are.
It was 36 and you came back for a second year?
Oh, I was the devil. You have no idea. Like, it was all my fault.
I was
I
here for that.
purposely increased it myself and
But every
It's not-
year, we, at the end of this meeting, we say we're comfortable, we want to change a thing, and every year, the May meeting, somebody bumps it down.
Yeah,
Well-
and that's okay
Bump it down, just do it now.
if you're
All right, so what are you looking at?
Well, I'm looking at 725,000 in the reserves, take away the 50,000, you talked about the 16.8%,
so take away the 50 and put
725 is,
725.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll go for that.
okay,
You're saying we're still gonna buy the
We're
mules.
still buying the mules.
well,
out of reserves.
it's in reserves.
Yeah, we're still
We're just
buying.
decreasing the contribution.
Yeah.
So that comes to what, I'm sorry, what number?
16.
16.8.
Yeah, I would go for that.
Let me make sure.
I was gonna say no more than 16, but I'm playing with pennies.
So 725.
16 or 18, you're gonna get the same number of people are gonna do that.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that.
It needs to be 18.
16.8.
So I'm comfortable that we went through every line item. We're not gonna touch any of the operating and maintenance line items. We've already done that.
Yeah.
The only thing that's fungible right now is the
The
contribution.
reserve. Mhm.
I mean,
And we haven't based it, there's no just like rationale, really. I mean, Jack's spreadsheet said what?
We're short.
Don't call me that.
We're in a deficit, let's put it
Yes.
that way, for what we should have.
so I'll say this is 16 or 18 or 15 or 12, we're still shuffling deck chairs in the Titanic.
Yeah,
And we will be for several years.
Yes.
And my point being is I will support,
You're talking a couple dollars, by the way. As far as when it comes between 16.8 and 18.5, you're literally talking about
Right.
like less than five.
my point goes back to, I would still, I will support any number that the majority of the board comes to, as long as we are exhausting the options, and it sounds like we're on path for it, what could or could not go on a bond. So it sounds like we've eliminated the sidewalk piece, and then what I'm hearing is there's really no reason to go do any sort of walk with Mark and an arborist or anything like that. Right, for him to do that. The boardwalk one, we're still waiting on the report back.
Yep.
The pond bank restoration, we've already got sufficient information to take that to a bond attorney. We're still waiting on the rest of the pond, not the banks, but the other restoration things, we're waiting for a report back, because that could be, and again, I don't know if that's gonna fit or not. But there were big numbers about if you have to treat ponds and all that, so that was where the
I thought
the pond vendor was supposed to be going out and getting a final
Oh, okay.
report for us on.
The initial numbers, I guess what we saw, we went, you know,
Well, and that's my point is we kind of don't know where that number is, but he was supposed to be bringing something back by our May meeting.
Well, that was just for additional testing. He gave you the,
138,000.
well, that wasn't.
That's just for 10 ponds.
That was the huge resort, yeah.
But that's the Nutrizor just for 10 ponds.
Right?
Right.
What I had said was, what is the study to be able to get every pond looked at? To figure out, because those were just the 10 worst. And my question to him was, okay, does that mean that number 11 were in the okay, sort of kind of maybe pretty zone, or are we still in the crappy zone? It just happens to be number 11 and not number 2. So to get the rest of the ponds assessed, to figure out the nutrient treatments or whatever else it'll take to get the ponds restored. And then I would like to see whether or not that's a bondable item or not. And then what Shell mentioned before, is
we can ask, but I think that's maintenance. I don't think that's,
it may well be.
I don't think that's,
Well,
I knew they're gonna say yes to that. I looked at the 130, 160, whatever it was. And the only thing I was very concerned about that is not only the price, but when you read the email, it basically said, and there's really no guarantee that we might have to do this again in a year. So I was like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm looking for a guarantee. If I can't do it, that just seems to be throwing money away.
And I'm not in disagreement with that point, but back to the part of the question of whether it's bondable or not. If a pond, in my non-lawyer's mind, if a pond bank restoration is a bondable item, and clearly is a bondable item, as long as we get an engineering study, which we've got, then why would the underwater of a restoration not similarly be a bondable? Whether or not we choose to do it.
You know,
Right.
definitely we can ask, and in my opinion, it's maintenance. It's very clear in my head.
And then the last one would be what Shell mentioned before of the irrigation systems, of a wholesale irrigation system replacement. How do we get a number on that? So my point being on all those, I'm okay if we do 12 or 15 or 18 or whatever. I would still like to see the the potential for a bond exhausted, and I realize it's not gonna happen in time for this fiscal year budget.
Yeah.
That I get. But I would like to see that that conversation exhausted with some reasonable due haste. I can't support any double-digit budget increase until we've ran that conversation to the end. As long as the board's willing to commit to some reasonable engineering studies there, that if bond council comes back and says, hey, no way in hell are you gonna ever get the pond treatment stuff.
Right.
Okay, this like the sidewalk one, okay.
Right, okay.
that's money.
So I can tell you right now, you're not getting pond treatment. Like, not even close.
The.
Yep.
Okay.
Phosphorus.
Yeah, all they're doing is removing the phosphorus.
Restoration, pond slopes,
Okay.
yes,
So
but
then it's-
not any sort of water treatment.
Then it's down to whatever we see on the boardwalk report, which is already pending. We don't have to do anything else there. And then the irrigation systems. If we run those two to ground, I can't think of anything else that's.
Yeah, I mean, we've got alleys that we can bond, and we've got, how about the bollard lights?
I mean, the alleys I brought up a while ago, I would love to look at the bond on the alleyways.
Bollard lights are only like three.
See, now, this is where in our bond discussion, we're start swaying, because now we're starting to pick everything out of the budget that we can bond and we can't. Right, we just, I mean,
Well, I would like to understand what is again, whether we decide to or not is a separate question.
so the.
What
the
is
request-
possible to bond?
So the request from the last meeting was to review pond slopes, sidewalks, and also we had mentioned boardwalks, because we knew replacement boardwalks. Now, now continuation of the workshop, we're asking for.
Well, my request out of the last meeting was to have the bond council here so we could ask questions and
Yeah,
have.
he's on a cruise.
Okay, which is
Yeah.
fine. I get that.
Well, I didn't want to call in because it
No,
was
no, no,
gonna be
no, I-
breaking it down, it's just gonna be used.
But I will tell you, even if we exhaust all of this, it's not gonna affect your budget this year.
No.
That ship has sank.
The budget this year, like.
Yeah.
The budget this year, I'm, like I said, 12 to 18, whatever.
So you're talking about moving forward.
I want to know what we can exhaust in there, because the alleyway ones, we've been kind of back and forth on there. That was initially something I put in there, say, can we bond alleyways? Now, understanding the alleyways, we're on 2 to 3 year kind of sort of per.
Each
Years per
village.
village.
Yeah, and that's always been there, by the way, that's been there for like 10 years.
No, I understand that, but that would mean that, hey, instead of doing every one village every 2 to 3 years, now all of a sudden we're saying, hey, in a 3-year period that we have to do the bond, we're gonna do
All of them.
more than one.
But it also
Yeah.
means, but the reality of that also means that when the lifespan of that is over, we're gonna bond again.
Right, because now you've done everything in a lump sum as opposed to,
Right,
I get it.
so,
You know,
I disagree with that.
yeah, that just seemed,
I think we need to space out the maintenance on these things a little bit better.
Yeah.
You know, right now, we're trying to play catch up. Once we caught up, you know, things will space out a little bit more, and we'll be able to more judiciously use reserves to pay for some of this stuff.
And my problem is the catch-up, the best case scenario you had in catch-up was what, 2034? 2035? We're talking a decade away, and that's.
We're like
that's the
2037 or so.
Right, and that's the sunniest picture, not even accommodating for any of the half dozen. areas.
but it took us over 2 decades to get here,
About 3 decades.
I get it,
almost.
but I'll go back to the comment I made. We've now got, hey, one board that is, I'm gonna say we're fiscally responsible. Every board says that. We're the first ones trying to reasonably tackle this problem of the past 28 years of sins. We don't know what comes after us. In 4 years, it may not be the 5 of us here, and somebody comes up and says, "Nah, no, we've had enough." And listen, if I was a resident and came into, we started double-digit increases in 22, if we would go all the way to 28 and say there's 6 years, 7 years of double-digit increases, there's a good chance the community is gonna say, what in the hell is going on with CDD that every year?
Hopefully it will not go that many years. Okay? Let's
Yeah.
take a look and see what we're doing, because we're doing some fairly large increases. Okay, and you're getting an awful lot done through ECDD's help.
Well, and that's my question. I'm trying to get a rough barometer of, take a 5-year period.
Well, we didn't forecast that part. Okay, as far as what the growth would be and how much more money would be needed for that. Didn't look at that at all
How much more money do we need for what? I'm sorry.
in reserves. I mean, we could.
Okay.
I didn't go forward more than 1 year as far as estimating that stuff.
Sure.
Well, but I mean, my ultimate question is over a 5-year period, what's the percentage of increases I would need as a straight line average year over year for 5 years in order to get us caught up?
Caught up to what level?
To a 1.0 reserve,
Okay,
everything we've identified here reasonably fixed with, we're not gonna make assumptions that all of a sudden we're gonna get hit by lightning and the town's gonna blow up, being just a static shot of what's broken today.
Let me look at it, take it.
I mean, if that number comes up at,
We already did it. It's gonna be 10% increases for the next 5 years, and then you start leveling off to between 3% and 5% increases.
you're saying 10% over the next 5 years?
At minimum.
Okay.
Yep.
That was key, at minimum. At maximum,
Again, that's,
Well, but you can't,
I
you
can't,
can't,
yeah, I can't.
you're trying to get a definite where
I'm trying to get a
none
range.
exists,
Yeah.
none exists.
I'm trying to get a range, and I can zero out variables.
10 to 20.
Is that it? Is it?
Well, I mean, I mean, you to scientifically put something in to predict all, there's no way you can do it. So 10 to 20.
Well, I'm trying to eliminate variables. If we say nothing else breaks, and we just take a static shot of what we know is broken today. If we don't do a bond, if we assume between the CPI and the construction indexes, what other variables do we have?
What number are you trying to reach in your reserves?
I'm trying to figure the 1.0.
1.1%, one time your
Is that
annual
what-
operating?
Is that,
Yeah.
is it, well, is that what we're all agreeing is the right reserve number?
No, I don't think so, because that should be a dynamic number. You don't keep a static amount of 1.0 because you build your reserves up and then you spend
It
it
could
to
be
zero.
0.8, it could be 1.2. It really, it ebbs and flows. I mean, there's just like, you know,
Yeah, you're not targeting
monthly
an
expenses in your home.
exact amount. You
Yeah, in order
you
to do
spend it,
that,
it
you
goes
have
down,
to
you
blow
build
it
it
out.
up, spend it again.
Yeah.
But you're right, it is ebbs and flows because you're gonna spend some years and then have to replenish and go back and forth.
Well,
Yeah. That's,
Floor.
There's a floor of which you should have, and then it ebbs and flows over the floor. It's no different than any balance sheet or.
so what's your floor? then?
And I was gonna say, if your target's 1.0, what's your
I
floor?
mean, your floor has got to be, in my opinion,
And
like
what year?
4.
And what year though?
It's just a floor. It's a
At
floor.
any point,
What it is, you can't go below that. That's like
It's
the.
just a hard deck of what it is. I mean.
I agree.
We're in no danger of either of these points. So what are we at, 0.3? I mean, 0.25, so we're in no danger.
I mean, right now, we're about 0.5.
And this is without any unknown and
We're 2.8
legislation
million.
changes, and no more
5.8
FEMA. and-
million on a $6 million budget.
So we're just about 0.4.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, what's the tolerance of the board for a floor? We're
Right.
playing with swags here, but we gotta lock out some of these variables. What's the floor?
When in doubt, you go to your reserve study. That'll tell you what your floor is.
Well, reserve study.
You don't wanna go by that because you're.
No, it'll say- I know, listen, they gave us a spreadsheet. We could pull the streetlights off.
Yeah, that's like that.
The methodology of that study was.
So,
was the numbers. they
If you
looked
want to look at, if we put the 725,000 in reserves this year, $800,000 the next 5 years, we will exceed our reserve requirements by 2037.
Well, but again, you're making false assumptions.
I know.
Cost inflation.
We have no idea what it's going to be.
I know, but it's not what you're using.
We can at least have historicals and say that, here's what it was.
Historicals in the last 5 years.
I hear you.
I know.
I mean, here's why I think that's ridiculous, okay? When market professionals can't predict the next 2 or 3 years at all, and they can't give guidance to anyone's financial security, and we're supposed to go ahead and get some accurate data, forget it.
But I wouldn't.
I don't know, I don't understand.
I'll tell you what,
No, I don't think so. And I think if we're adding this amount every year to reserves, we're not going low. We haven't done that.
So I think it's duly noted what Greg's looking for, but, I mean, I don't wanna go any less than that 18.5.
And I'd support 18.5 as long as we exhaust the what's bondable conversation at some point in a reasonable time frame in the next couple months.
Is that what the number is?
No, it's 16.8. So to get it to
16.8.
that number that they're
Because you
talking
just
about
Changed your.
Right.
is we would increase it back
Sean
to,
wants to throw the fifth
Push
grade
it back into the.
Just
to the number
800.
we had.
you would put this back at 800.
And I bet you mine's 725 after the May meeting.
And then that brings you back to 18.5,
There you go.
which is putting 800 grand. in.
Dave, you have my commitment that whatever number we agreed to in the May meeting, I won't come off that anyway, so whatever. That makes you feel any better.
All right, well, where are we going after this?
Brenda, can you look, I'm trying to look at this dollar wise. Okay,
It's not estimating, that's what I'm
Well, it's well over a half hour meeting now, so.
Yeah, I'm just, it was just the, that before they
So let's see, it's,
done switch times. Well,
Got numb.
yeah, I got numb to it.
so for your townhomes, you're talking about a $96 increase for townhomes.
A year.
And this is all annual.
Yeah.
So 18.5% gives your townhomes, all of your townhomes, $96.12
Right.
as the
$2 a
annual
week.
increase.
Just started.
Yeah, your
Don't
your
say that.
cottages, your
Don't
cottages
you say that.
are
I go every day, so I understand.
57. Your cottages are $121.95 annually. And then your villages,
$191.
and then your estates are
$275.
Sorry, so I think we've had this conversation before. What actually has to go in the letter?
so it's
Your
a
name.
legal letter. It basically tells you what parcel you own as the homeowner. This is what and it's just O&M. It has nothing to do with your debt. It doesn't incorporate your debt number in there, your bond, if you paid it off or not. It's just strictly operation and maintenance. So it'll have a table for your parcel ID. This is what you were paying last year. This is what it's gonna pay this year, and then there's legal ease. And then we, as a board, include an additional letter with that explaining why we've come to an 18.5% increase and what we're gonna do with those funds.
The legal letter follows the legal template, but then there's
That's
a
right.
more English letter.
We add a friendly read,
Right.
basically, because a lot of people look at that and
They
they're
don't
like,
understand.
what do you mean? And they don't understand it because it doesn't incorporate what they're thinking when they look at their tax bill going, well, you gave me a letter that said my assessments are going down.
Right.
They're not, because it doesn't incorporate your debt.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, a lot of people in Celebration have paid off their
bonds.
Yeah, Artisan has a few more years left in Platinum Village.
I'm good.
Well, it's not by village, it's by person.
You can pay off the whole
Yeah.
bond yourself.
Well, yeah, but they're,
But
So there's a
they're-
lot.
Artisan still.
There's a
does
lot
the
in here
bonds.
that their bond has been paid off. So,
Gary, you have something?
Comment, as in previous years, you know how to sell this, is a net letter from the board. Is tell them how much in dollars that is per year. Then it's a little more amenable than listening to 18%. That sounds like a high interest rate for a credit card.
Right.
But if you tell them how much it is annually, $121 a year, you can swallow that and remind them that that's the price of a Starbucks a week.
and I think,
We're the last person
Brenda, in
to
our
mention
planning
that. It did
budget,
not go over well.
didn't we put the dollar amount? Cause we've had this conversation, I
Yeah.
thought.
Correct. We
template.
put what the difference was between last year and the proposed amount plus the percentage. I can look up
Yeah.
that letter for details, but yes, we did
But the
include that.
Yeah,
the percentage is always the one that gets us.
Yeah.
yeah.
Don't.
So, but I think last year and maybe even the year before, we put both the percentage and
Correct.
the dollar. So we can
Yeah.
definitely take out, if the board wants, we can take out.
He broke it down to a dollar per day.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna think about this. but-
percentage is scary. It always is. And when you break it down to annually, and then if you blow that out daily,
18% of a still really damn low number.
it looks scary, you know?
I think that we had the discussion last year, because we've always included the percentage. And then one year, we don't include the percentage, we include the other stuff, but then people are gonna ask, what's the percentage?
Well, and I don't want
Let
to,
them figure it out. They got a calculator.
I don't want to appear that we're trying to hide something. People are going to do it anyway. Just put it in there. Otherwise, you look like they're hiding it. All of a sudden now it's, oh my God.
That's,
Yes, so last year we had at the top, this is your proposed annual maximum assessment in a box. At the very end of the letter was the entire chart. So it lists townhome, cottage, village. It listed all of them with what the proposed is, what last year's was, the dollar change and the percent. That was the letter last year.
So we can leave out the percentage or you can leave out the dollar.
I would.
The additional letter that we put is up to you all.
you were always saying, how do I explain to my Show the letter. Yeah, the whole. They're gonna ask anyways, that's the thing.
I would leave
Line
it.
out the door.
I would leave the percentage just because if we don't, then somebody's gonna pull the wrong percentage off the wrong number instead of.
And it'd be the wrong percentage.
Instead of an 18%, it's gonna be 128%.
Right, we're controlling the narrative.
Yes.
We don't include it, we're not controlling the narrative.
But if it's the wrong narrative, who cares?
Oh, no. Fill out social media presents.
I mean, Dave, the narrative is the five of us are gonna vote on it and it's gonna be what it's gonna be. I mean,
You are gonna be here to vote because it's on a Tuesday.
Why are we putting a target on our back by putting the percentage on there?
We already have a target on our back. Do you
let
think
that-
you're gonna remove your target? I saw you get up the salad. I can see that right there.
We'll vote.
I know, yeah, I think it's.
We continue.
Yes, what else do we have?
There's no continuum, like this is it.
Thank you.
so
We're
the,
done.
the one other thing that we were on the capital, block of yellow projects.
Huh?
The other
Did
thing
not
that
put any in.
I still have not heard a number on the fence extension thing across that
You got that.
we've been punting on that for a year as an identified safety issue.
And that's, but that's multiple locations.
It was 100,000.
Hundred and some $1,000
We got,
from the second vendor.
it's over 100,000.
Hundred.
That's what I thought we were at.
It's like between 100, it's 120, 130, right around there. It was expensive. Hey, David, because they got it all the way down on that.
Well, there's this shell across
Other variables, but
on the sidewalk is there's like a green stretch of
It's gonna have to do.
green piping fence.
Very low, yeah.
Somebody can identify
I
that
was-
for 10,000 as you're going down the hill.
A senior,
Mark studied it. It's actually a that fence. Up. There's a
make it 15.
rise from the run. That if the kid, especially next to the school, ends up rolling off.
I'm gonna add that to my
That's
list.
just the power
You
doesn't
can't
work.
take
right.
that out of reserves. And
It's just, in my mind, it's a reality. That's $100 and some odd $1,000 thing that it's been identified for a year that we have.
Okay, so I'm glad you said that because I was gonna fight for the 16, but the reality is when you're adding that, we can't go less than 18. We have to build that. And we've said that we've known it's an issue. We know it's a concern.
These are
We
identified.
have to.
Listen, this is
Identified safety
sidewalks,
issue, yeah.
pond slopes and fences. They're all identified life and safety issues.
Yes, yeah, so we have to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one more time, the point of contention is gonna be that $800,000 number.
that's
right?
what's driving your budget. I mean,
All the other ones are inarguable, right? We went through those and they make sense.
oh, every line, yeah.
You
So-
can easily argue that budget thing when you say we only have $2.8 million in reserves right now. We should have around 7 million or 6 million.
That's your,
It's a simple fallback and even.
Steady your mule, we're gonna get you a bicycle.
We're adding bicycles, mules, jack
do you want
statue.
Infomark to own it?
Electric bikes. Electric bikes.
192,000 for the railing.
Oh, sorry,
Oh my
we were way
goodness.
off.
that's from the vendor that's from
200.
Island Village.
Yeah.
Now you gotta take into consideration, that's the most expensive railing there is. And we went pretty much
And then you said,
end to end,
Yeah.
so.
Well, and guys,
If
we've
the
also
board
said,
member wants to go out there, we can maybe eliminate, who knows,
Is that the
50,
only
60, 70 feet of it.
No, there's a couple of locations.
There's two locations, one on each side of a green barn and at the.
192 is inclusive of both of those.
Pardon me?
Those 192, the 190, the number he just cited is both of those locations.
Correct.
Yes. It's like, what, 175 feet or something?
No, it looks like.
That railing has to be fabricated and
Yeah.
so what I asked for that railing is instead of just replacing the whole railing,
that's what he's saying.
just have them. Just have the NP, right, basic.
Just extending it, yeah.
It is 536 linear feet is what he has.
Well, and I'm gonna throw it on the table right now so we can kill it. We had talked about, do we want to do something other than the piping that's there? Do like a chain link or something?
No, it's gotta match all up and down the avenue. It's the
$200,000, guys, I gotta ask the question.
Well, it's an easy answer for me. It's gotta be consistent.
Just remember, the turn for a monkey wrench and on Greenbrier, it doesn't match because you got ours and then you got the schools.
So if we wanted to do something on Greenbrier, okay. But on Celebration Avenue, from all the way to Artisan, all the way back, it's the same railing.
If there's any conversation with the school district, understanding who owns what. Tell the school district, hey, your fence is out there, your fence needs to go longer.
Why don't we wait?
Can
till-
It's, I don't think it's.
Can we punt this?
Wait till next year.
Is this- Do we need to put this detail into the budget or can we punt?
No, I
Well,
think
it's a $200,000 number. If it's gonna be chain link, it'd be a $25,000 number. So yeah, it makes a difference.
But not.
You're gonna assess for it. It's a one-time project, then that money for every year after this would just be baked into your budget. You could throw it into reserves, or you can just do it out of reserves. You've got 800 going in
Do it out of
this year, and you have 2.8 sitting in there now.
So if you just add the 192 on top, if you keep everything else the same, where we were at 16 point something, if you add in that 192, where do we have? What percentage was?
No, you're at 18.5% right now.
That's without the 192?
That's without the 192, because we changed that back to 800.
Now you're gonna be at 20.
We have to change that to 992 and see what.
So I can do it right here.
20.5.
Mr. Chairman, giving them too much food.
Well, I'm not going over 18. So whatever the 18.5 is, we're moving it to 20. That's just 200.
23.3.
Whoa. It's cardiac arrest. No, it's not, I wouldn't vote for it.
So what just came out, is my question. So they, at 18, and right now we don't have to worry about it, because if 18 is the number you're saying, then 18 is the number you're saying, but eventually something's gonna need to come out.
Something will have to come out. Find it.
I mean, is that still, that's still with Brett's number? Brett's
Yeah, there's a
original.
little, there's 300,000 in there. I don't know what the number for Island Village is gonna come in at.
I don't know, you got to go up to bid if you're gonna do that, right?
He told me that the number's gonna be pretty close to that, because you also have Pine Straw that he didn't give us an increase number on for Island Village.
I'm calling bullshit on a 20% increase for.
I know.
One village on top of nine.
Seems to
He
be.
just threw out a number.
Well, he went off the construction plans because Mattamy hasn't given us the actual definitive
Right.
plan to say the CDD owns this and that's it. He's going off the entire construction plan and guessing what's gonna be CDD, but he doesn't know because Mattamy hasn't told us.
So when does that come about from that?
We know.
Then what's the number? Did you just give Brett the stuff that you know? If you know definitively what
He's got
CDD
what we
owns,
got from quite a while ago, which
the
was.
construction plans, I thought.
Landscape planning.
Does it have on there what the CDD is gonna be
Yeah, you can
maintaining?
figure that out.
Yeah, you get it. They didn't get it, but.
Okay.
I don't think it's gonna be anywhere near 300,000. I don't see how.
I have no idea.
Yeah, you highlighted, I think you highlighted flats, color coded the CDD tracks, right? That's.
We'll get old Brett.
Angel was asking for that.
Calling him now?
Yep.
I love it. Angel says she wants to go to Brent.
Tell them we came up with a number of about $38,000 that we're sticking.
Hey, we're sitting in the budget meeting. You're on speakerphone. I fluffed in 300,000 for that Island Village. Everybody's under the consensus here that it's gonna be more like 38 grand. So what is your feeling on that?
I mean.
And you brought up Pine Straw too, so that number's not in here.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have Pine Straw included in that,
40 grand.
So Russ said, so not 38, but 40?
if Russ was buying, yes, it'd be 40.
All right, so I need a number. Russ said you already have what the CDD is gonna be maintaining, so you should be able to give us a number off that.
Who has that?
You said you have that.
Y'all bid on it.
You bid on it.
I on the entire landscape package, so that's all of Island Village Phase 2.
We're gonna hold on.
You can say right now.
282B.
What ends up happening, besides the landscape package, typically there's 10 to 15%, max 20% is maintenance. What we turned in for the landscape bid was close to $2.5 million landscape. If you put 10%, you're gonna be, $250,000.
That's, we're going to RFP then, because it's more than 198,000, so.
It's an addendum to the existing contract.
Oh.
He's just. So what,
I think we
is
cleared
there
it
a
at
safe
220.
number to put in here? I put in 300. I mean,
I mean, they're working on that estimate right now, Angel, and I thought we had booked 27 to get that over to you. I mean, I would tell you to take it to 200, I guess. We'll just figure it out.
I'd rather go over than lower.
Yeah, had that plot stuff from Tanner. It's gonna be CD versus HOA.
Okay.
So as soon as I get.
Linda, you're down.
I'll follow up on where we're at with that estimate, try to get you guys numbers as quickly as I can.
Okay, can you have them to me by Friday, please?
You said 20
Yeah, this Friday. No, 27th is our meeting. I need it well before that. The 27th is our meeting, our budget meeting, so I need it like way before that.
Okay.
All right,
Put a rush on it.
thanks, Brett. So 200,000, does that seem like still too much?
I think that's a safe number.
Safe number?
On a $1.1 million contract, I'm still, that's 17% of the total value of the contract.
How big is Island Village compared to? a
I mean,
village
it's
here?
phase two, like. the
No,
biggest
it's
village
it's
we've ever built.
multiple. It's phase 2A and 2B, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And there is a lot of landscape.
Yeah.
There's a lot of landscape in Allen Village.
And a lot of pine straw, which I didn't even include in here. I didn't increase the pine straw number.
That's not the only estimate we got. Our pond number's an estimate too, based on who we select.
The hay is what there is. It's unirrigated.
Which is gonna always look like
Correct.
crap. Well, I can leave it at the 1.3, or I can lower it down 100,000.
Well, I mean, guys, at this point, I'd say, I'd still go back to we're pegging a percentage.
Mhm.
And then we're backing into the percentage and whatever we negotiate with. We can either choose not to cut grass or we can choose not to fix the fence. So we'll figure that out within the execution of the budget.
So again, these are your two numbers that are driving this. 800,000 to reserves, 200,000 for your fence railing. Unless you want to take the 200 out and use your reserves to pay for the fence.
Or unless somebody wants to go up over 18%. The majority of
Correct.
somebody wants to go
That
up
is
over
correct.
18%.
That's the ice cream truck.
He's
Running.
he has to work for the 20%. So he's blind.
That's what we've gone way over time, but you'll learn.
So does anybody have a tolerance to go over 18% to accommodate for this?
No. That's the largest increase we've ever had.
Yeah, I don't.
Remember, we had a 36.
You had a 36.6.
That was not the effective increase. We didn't.
It was.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
No.
The first year I was here, 2023, Brenda did the things. She pulled it off.
You don't remember 88%, Jeff?
I better stop saying that because Paul Collins like blasted me and he's like, you sent out an 80%. I'm like,
No, he sent out.
yeah, I did not come up with 80%.
Forgot about that stuff.
So is there tolerance to go over 18% from anybody? If not,
I'm always, if we can justify it. I'm
Yeah,
not-
I mean, we're justifying it right here by the best information we got.
Well, but the 800 is the fluff. I mean,
Not fluff,
I'm sorry,
not fluff.
that is not, we've got 200 allocated.
So
but
they-
allocate the 800 for me.
So you know, the problem is that we go ahead and we tell everybody, look, we're raising the increase to reserves. But this is a reserve item, so we're not gonna use reserves. And it just, I feel like a hypocrite with that. So,
Good.
I mean, I do, but
Well, the problem being we're not catching up on, and I get what you're saying, it's a reservable item that we should be spending on reserves, but
And your
we're never gonna catch up on reserves unless we.
but we are making a contribution, a sizable contribution to reserves. Right? Where in the past, what we do, Shell, is we go ahead and go, look, we're gonna add 250. And then, okay, then we use the 250 on sidewalks. So we never really did it. This is the first year we're actually doing it.
No, that's good.
And which is good, and we need to build on that, but then it's kind of like, well, it's done, he's leaving.
I don't think we've ever actually put money into reserves without having it planned in the budget, and we're taking it right back out.
And then some probably.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
That's why we started when I was on the board at 6.4 and now we're down to 2.8. Yeah.
But really, what the reality is that you've got to do vehicles, maybe cameras, maybe some bollards, sidewalks, alleys, boardwalks, pond banks, preventative ponds. maybe a new clear cleaner, and, the railings, and we're just gonna have to keep on bumping the budget every year, 15, 18, 20% in order to pay for it.
So what number are we going with, guys? Is it 18? Is it 20? What are we doing?
Well,
I've heard Jack and Tom say they're not going with 18.
Yeah, 18.5. Good with those numbers.
Well, yeah. No more than 18.5. 16.3%.
Dave?
Whatever's justifiable, put a number up there, looks good.
We could justify whatever the hell we want up to 300 gazillion thousand% increase.
That's what I said.
I'm. So what,
So that's why when I say 16, 18, 20%, that,
so what number are you putting?
I'm sitting back and watching this one. Go ahead.
You're like.
Come on.
Okay, let me just ask this question.
You guys make some decisions.
The $200,000 fence railing, do you want that to come out of reserves? I think everybody's under the same impression that we're gonna do the work, right?
We have to get.
We have to do the work.
Okay, so do you want it in here in this budget or do you want it out of reserves?
Goes out of reserves.
This number?
Are you asking an accounting question of where we
Are you-
allocate
what
the
is this?
cost, or are you
Is this
taking it
gonna
out?
be a recurring, ongoing repair and maintenance expense? Yes or no?
That's right. If it's not, it needs to come out of your reserves.
Yeah, no, that is not what, no.
You just put a place in.
She's asking whether or not we're taking it out of the 800 or it's in addition to the 800, correct?
In this case, well, the addition to the.
Yeah, but, right, it would be just like the vehicles, the capital expense that comes out of reserves.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can take it out of
Yes.
your general fund.
Yes,
That's all I needed to know.
absolutely.
Now you're at the 18.5.
I know, but the,
But now you have to add 200,000 on top of the 800,000.
to the reserve.
They're asking for $1 million in reserves, that's what they're asking.
Okay,
Yes.
what? So because you're taking it out of
Yes.
reserves, you wanna add it back?
Yeah.
That's the question, is whether or not we're gonna,
Well, then we just did a wash, guys. You're still at 23.3%, which you
understand.
guys are not in agreement with, so.
that's why I'm trying to go around the horn and ask, are we adding 192 or are we taking it out of the 800?
Yeah.
The first two have voted to take it out of the 800.
I'm saying take it out of 800, and any excess that we have and the other contracts we have backfilled in the reserves.
Joe, you adding or taking out?
I'd hold it the 18.5 for the time being.
Looks like you're in swing.
All right,
Which way you going?
doesn't matter. It's 3 out of 5.
Oh.
So David, I don't have to say anything. See how that worked?
I'll make note of that. Shall make note of
I gotta
that.
get out of here tonight.
I agree. I
I
have to
didn't
drive
realize-
down south to Coral Springs. I'm with you.
I didn't bring my sleeping bag.
18.5. That's where you're ending right now.
And everybody's gonna take a knife and do a pinprick, and we're doing it in blood, that we're not coming off the 18.5.
I don't know where you're pricking, but forget it. That's not.
For the purposes of what is actually presented to the public, can we eliminate all of those line items that have nothing in it? Because right now, the budget what you have has a bunch of stuff
Oh,
on there.
yeah, no. What will be presented to the public is gonna be in your May agenda. So this will be cleaned up, nice and pretty, no empty line items, no highlighted yellow, nothing like that. It'll be in a PDF version that everybody will see in the,
And traditionally, the chair is working with staff to work on the nice letter to highlight, hey, here are the big three things we did, here are the big three things we're gonna do.
you guys do not change this
Yes,
at your May meeting.
so everybody pull out,
Come down.
everybody pull out the
Yeah.
knife and.
So-
do the blood.
So,
Can we not give them a little narrative on what some of those fundamental things are? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
We won't give them the whole list.
No,
but
I-
everything.
But explanation of.
Ratios, I'm not, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just general rule of health, for most people, it's like, hey, have 6 months of liquid reserve, so that they could kind of understand the framework that we're reaching towards.
Yep.
That narrative.
Can I,
I'll give you the narrative if you.
I was gonna say, can I
mean,
suggest that you just circulate last year's letter and what everybody wants to?
Yeah, I
recommend as a.
I can't think of what's in there, so.
Yeah, we can absolutely put that because right off the top, you have 3 months of operating and the burn rate for this district is a little over $400,000 a month.
Right,
Just in your
just the
normal
basic stuff, right?
expenditures.
Right.
So you've got 3 months. of
Besides
that
anything else.
That we have to keep.
So we can also give you our feedback on that. Send it, and that's.
Dave, I'll include yours this year.
We didn't get one, so it makes a decision.
Oh, you're gonna send it out.
She'll wait till everybody else reads the letter.
I'm just, when can I vote against including the percentage in the letter? That's the only way.
You could vote and we just go, good job. Anything else? Julie?
No.
I don't
No.
think so. So I'm looking forward to the May meeting.
So we will have at some
Well, yeah, I second and triple that.
So
Yeah.
at some point in the not too distant future, we will have bond council, that one, when they're back from a cruise.
Anyways, is the meeting still going on? No,
No.
it's over and Greg's still talking. But that's not a surprise, now is it?
Just saying, don't want that close.
No one's surprised.
No one's really a fair meeting.
It's okay.
Next $2 a month.
Thank you all for joining.
Angel, though, we got a lesson for.
We spent a half an hour.